everybody doing? All right, so I'm going to bring the guests on here in just a second. Good evening, though. We've had a night of technical issues on an episode about technical things. So I'm excited that everyone out there is joining us tonight. This is an episode on cybersecurity. And I got to say, that may not be the sexiest topic of all time, but I think it's one that we really need to know more about. The more that I've looked into this and researched this, the more that I've recognized that this is something that we all need to know about as orthodontists and as business people. So this is the Digital Orthodontist. I'm your host, Dr. Kyle Fagala, and Dr. Jep Paschal actually said this, but he said there's no bigger threat to the orthodontic practice today than a cyber attack. And I know that sounds like hyperbole, but I think it's true. Data breaches are happening every day in dental and orthodontic practices, and they're becoming increasingly more common. Worst of all, the damages that can result from this sort of thing can cost thousands of dollars, not to mention the expense of having to close down your practice for an average of 2 weeks. So tonight I'm going to be joined by Dr. Lauren Manfred. She's an orthodontist who's going to share her personal experience of getting hacked. We've got Gary Salman from Black Talon. Gary's going to tell me in a second if I'm saying his name incorrectly. I hope that I'm not, but we'll see. And then I've got Jep Paschal, who's an all-around technology and computer expert. First, I want to recommend that you join us for the Digital Orthodontist Live Meeting 2021. This is going to be April 8th and 9th. It's going to be live and in person from my new home in Memphis, Tennessee. And it's going to be a virtual meeting for you, but 10 speakers are going to come all from over the United States to my house. So we got Dr. Stuart Frost, Cole Johnson, Nicole Wax, Anila Dicula, David Sarver, Courtney Berry, Shane Langley, Lisa Alvitro, Candace Coleman, Chris Feldman, and then also Alex Rasmussen for Neon Canvas will co-host with me. And we're going to cover material that is relevant to everyone in your practice. So definitely we're going to focus on the orthodontist. We're also going to focus on the admin team, the clinical team, your financial coordinator, your marketing coordinator. And so it's going to be a great meeting for the whole team. You can sign up now at tdolive.com and save 50% with the early bird promo code, early bird in all caps. And it's just $50 for doctors, $25 for staff, and it includes 8 CE hours from 3M. All right, so we're going to go ahead and bring our guests on right now. And we're going to talk about cybersecurity. So if you guys will go ahead and start your video, we'll jump on in with this. I'm going to try tonight to respond to Facebook comments, if there's even any way to do that. So if you're out there on Facebook, please comment for us. And then if you're here on Zoom, you can comment there as well. So it looks like we got everybody loaded up. Guys, how are we doing?
Doing great, thanks.
Hey, thank you.
I can hear all of you. I can see all of you. You all look beautiful. Let's get going. So I'm going to read some bios, perhaps a boring way to start, but I like to get to know people. And I think it's important that everyone out there knows who we're talking with here. It looks like we got a good group here on Zoom and on Facebook as well. So Dr. Lauren Manfred, we're going to start with Lauren. She grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma. She got her bachelor's in biology from the University of Arizona. I also got my bachelor's in biology, not in Arizona. That's a much cooler school. But she then attended UCLA. She caught the California bug, I think, attended ortho residency in Oregon, which is not in California, I guess, but she has a private practice, Manfred Orthodontics, that's in Fountain Valley, California, and she lives in neighboring Newport Beach, which is a beautiful little area there. And she is married to Brian, and they have 2 sons, Reed and Hayes. And she's also, notably, a backup dancer for the all-orthodontist band Relapse. Lauren, how are you?
I'm doing great, Kyle. Thanks for having me today.
Awesome. Thank you for doing this. Gary, and is it Salman or Salman?
You got it. Salman.
Which Salman, like how people mispronounce salmon. Gotcha.
Pretty much.
All right. Yeah. So he is the CEO and co-founder of Black Talon. So we have Salman from Talon. All right. Fair enough. Security. And you've probably heard of Black Talon. I feel like I had not heard of you until a couple of years ago. And now I hear about you all the time. It's a company dedicated to data security and breach recovery. Gary has 30 years of experience in software development and computer IT, and he even developed one of the very first cloud-based healthcare systems, which is interesting because we're going to talk later tonight about cloud-based PMS or practice management systems and how maybe they're not as safe and secure as you might think. Gary has trained thousands of practices across the U.S. He's worked like with the FBI and all sorts of amazing stuff. His bio was incredible, and he's helped practices on cybersecurity. He's been in 30 national publications, a bunch of other stuff. He's also had 15 years as an instructor at West Point, and he's involved in law enforcement. So goodness gracious, these bios are incredible. All right. So Gary, thank you for being here. You're
Appreciate
looking
it.
very, very sharp. You're outside of New York, is that right?
Yeah, I'm about 45 miles north of New York City in the northern suburbs before it kind of turns to farmland. So
I like it.
Yep.
So we've got both coasts represented, and then Middle America with me and Jep. I guess Georgia is not really Middle America, but it's the South. It's
South.
the South. You sound so Southern. I love it. I don't know what Memphis is. I guess I don't know if it's Middle America. It's the South. I don't know. It's a
the
Delta.
South.
Yeah, sure. All right. So Jep Paschal is a proud husband, father of three, a solo practitioner, a technologist, and an orthodontic futurist. He probably has some Bitcoin. Is that true?
Yes.
Yes.
And
okay.
it's tanking a little bit right now.
Is it? Yeah, I can't keep up with that stuff. I have a few. Is it Dogecoin or is it Dogcoin? What is it?
It depends on which one you're talking about. Dogecoin.
Yeah, I have some of that. All right, so he got his bachelor's at Emory, dental at Georgia. Listen to this. He did prosthodontics and GPR residencies, and he received a master's in biomaterials at UT San Antonio. And then he decided, you know what? I like school, so I'm going to go back and do ortho. He did that at Eastman. He's had the privilege of lecturing all over the world, helping orthodontists improve in the practice and art of orthodontics. And he currently has a private practice in Georgia with 2 locations. That's the state, not the country. Ha, ha, ha. How many dual-trained prosthodontist orthodontists are there?
Haven't a clue, but at last count, I know of 3.
I was going to say.
That are only stupid enough to do pros first and then do ortho. But
there are 3. You should have a meeting every year. Now, are the 3 that are prosthodontists and orthodontists, are they practicing ortho or prostho or both or what?
I don't know the answer to that question currently.
Okay.
I the one guy I do know actually does both currently.
Wow.
But anyway, I am not a practicing prosthodontist anymore, so I am only an orthodontist in practice.
Yeah.
Just use my previous training just for some clinical stuff.
I think it's awesome. I actually really wanted to do prosthodontics like all D2 year. And then I came to my senses and did orthodontics instead.
Well done. Well done.
Really
you saved yourself a lot of time and heartache.
I love setting denture teeth for what it was worth. So now I just do it more slowly. It takes me 2 years to set denture teeth. All right. So let's jump into this. What we're going to do is we're going to look at cybersecurity. I don't know how you kind of chop up this elephant, as it were. We're going to look at it in 3 parts. What happens before a cyber attack, effectively, what happens during a cyber attack, and then what happens after a cyber attack. And we'll kind of discuss all the things around those topics throughout. Let's start with Gary. Gary is certainly the expert at this. The rest of us definitely have our own unique parts to play in this. Actually, I don't. I'm just the host. But Gary, we're going to start with you. So I guess the first place to start is, what are the most common mistakes that orthodontists make that make them more vulnerable to cyber attacks?
Right. So great question. So one of the things we see is the fact that the practices are kind of relying on technology they've had in their office for years to protect themselves, right? So they have a firewall, right? That's a blinking box next to the server. You look at it, you're like, hey, that thing's great. That's protecting me. I have antivirus software. That's going to stop ransomware attack. And I'm sure Dr. Lauren will talk about that as well. And I'm good. And the big thing to really understand here is there's a huge difference between what IT companies do and what cybersecurity firms do. And I think the best analogy is in your world. There are GPs and there are orthodontists. There are GPs and oral surgeons. They're both dentists technically, right? But you do very different things. And in our world, the cybersecurity firms have employees who are actually credentialed, right? And almost like board certified in security, versus IT companies who do basic things, right? They keep your computers up to date, they patch them, they play a really important role at keeping your practice up and running, but they're not specialists and they don't typically have access to the same types of tools. And more importantly, they don't do security 24/7 like a cyber firm does. And I think too many practices are saying, Dave, my IT guy, he's been great for 10 years. He tells me I'm fine. And then they turn around, walk into their office Monday morning, and their entire network's encrypted with ransomware. So I think that's a major change that orthodontists need to really start considering when they're looking at protecting their practice and being secure. Work with a specialist. That's what we do all day long.
Yeah, that sounds great. How long has this been a thing, like cyber attacks that are directed at, mom and pop orthodontists and dentists and maybe prosthodontist orthodontists? Like, how long has that been?
Right. So I've seen it about 5 years ago when I was working at another company before we started this, and I was receiving phone calls from clients. I ran the oral surgery division of a company, and I was getting phone calls to my desk. Hey, can you help us? Our system's fully encrypted with ransomware. We can't access our backups or our data. So it's been going on for a while. I mean, cyber's been an issue since, back in the early 90s, if you think about it, with dial-up modems. And then it's evolved to where we are today, which is, it's unbelievable what's going on, as we'll get into in a little bit.
Sure. I just don't remember hearing about it until maybe the last few years. I mean, maybe 5-6 years ago at the earliest. But now it seems like I'm hearing about it all the time. So along those lines, Lauren, actually, what's great about Lauren, a couple things. First off, we had some tech issues. We killed it. We slayed that tech issue. So I love that. The second thing is I actually knew Lauren had told me she'd had a cyber attack in one of the groups, whatever, and I'd kind of forgotten. So I knew Gary, obviously, with Black Talon, and he was the first one I kind of reached out to. He's the expert on this topic. And so I said, hey, do you know any orthodontists that would want to come on and talk about this? And nobody wanted to. And I kind of get that. I mean, I don't know, shame is the right word, but it's like embarrassing. You don't want to get on here. You want to say it, but Lauren offered herself up to do this, which is awesome. So it's definitely brave, but it's very much appreciated because it allows us to have someone in our industry that's sharing about this and makes it definitely real. So again, thank you. But I want to hear a little bit about what happened. So when was your cyber attack? And then what was your IT setup before that attack?
Yeah. Let me preface this by saying I may have gotten hacked, but I am not a hack, okay? This can happen to anyone. And what happened to me was honestly the most stressful, awful thing that has ever happened to me in my professional career. It happened in August 2017. I had purchased my practice, a small mom and pop practice, in 2015 actually. And when I bought the practice, I didn't give a second thought to IT. I bought a practice that had a nice bulky server, a great firewall that seemed to be working, everything Gary just said. And I was like, great, this is all I need. I had an IT guy that was 21 years old, and he would just come if something broke. I had 8 or 9 computers. We were operating with a server, and a server with a weak password at that, and old school external hard drive backups. So every night I had a Tuesday backup, and we'd put it in there, a Wednesday backup, and someone would take it home with them. I don't know if anyone else does that, but that's what I inherited, so I just went with it.
Did it?
And sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, did it? Wait till you do it.
Yep. So, naive me, I was thinking to myself, well, this is working perfectly. And my IT guy, he seemed pretty nice and smart. And I was like, well, it's all covered. And I never gave it any second thought. And on August 10th, 2017, it was a Friday. I'm closed on Fridays. My IT guy came in to do a few things with some new printers, and I'm on vacation, and he calls me and he's like, Lauren, something awful has happened. And I was like, what do you mean? And he goes, I'm at the office and every single screen has a skull and crossbones, and I cannot access anything. And he goes, I hate to tell you this, but I'm fairly positive we've been hit with a ransomware. And there was literally a message at the bottom of the screen, like a horror film, in broken English that said, if you would like the decryptor, your system has been hacked by Gryphon ransomware, which is supposedly an awful one. I didn't even know what ransomware was. And we demand payment in the form of 3 Bitcoins in order to get the decryptor. And long story short, we had an FBI agent that got involved. Some police got involved. They sent me over to the FBI. My IT guy's sweating. I was locked out of my system. And the only way to either fix it is to pay the hackers for the decryptor and pray you get it and that it works, or to insert your backups and hope that you can restore all the data you just got locked out of. Well, the latter didn't work for me. I hadn't been checking my backup disks. And the last functional backup I had was from February 26th, 2017. I lost every ounce of data in my software from February 26th to August 10th. 6 months of patient information. Any new patient I had seen, any chart note, anything. I sent over the Bitcoins. I sent over 2 Bitcoins, which at the time equated to $9,800. I didn't even know what a Bitcoin was. I didn't even know how to get one. I should have bought more, I'll tell you that. But it equates to $107,000 today or something crazy like that, or a week ago, last time I checked. I sent over the Bitcoins. It was actually on the advice of our FBI agent. She had been working this specific, they were able to narrow it down to my source of my ransomware attack to a specific city within Russia. I don't know how, but they were able to. She encouraged me to bargain them down, send them the 2 Bitcoins, and hope we were able to get a decryptor. Well, we got a decryptor and it didn't work at all. So, yeah, I suffered with PTSD for about 3 months after that. I literally had panic attacks at work. Go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt that because I would have it even if I'd gotten my data back. You never got your data back.
I never got my data back. I started from scratch and I took new records on every patient through the door. We didn't even have our schedule, Kyle. We didn't even have any schedule. It was like the computer froze February 26th.
Yeah.
We were hit with a hard brute force hit to our server. My password was password 1234.
Yes.
And just pretty much every combination of terrible, terrible things could have happened.
Man, we have the same password, which is so weird. So, man, there's a lot to unpack there. I guess what I would say is, yuck. I think this is why I wanted someone who'd had this experience, is just so people could just kind of like want to crawl under the table and die right now, and to kind of experience sort of the real nature of it, because I can't even imagine. So my wife Anna, who's out there watching, hi Anna, she had a time where her phone, she thought she'd lost like all of her photos, and like that was like the most stressful like 36 hours ever. Fortunately, we like got them back or whatever, but those moments are just like gut wrenching. When you add on top of that, the idea that now you've got like potentially thousands of patients you've got to like communicate with to let them know that you made this mistake, not to mention you having to pay somebody. I mean, I think you got out okay with like 2 Bitcoin at the time at like $9,800. I mean, I've heard like hundreds of thousands of dollars. We'll get into actually like how much price and all that kind of stuff. Sammy Thabet on Zoom said a colleague just spent $100,000 to get data back. Also, shout out to Clarence Red who commented on Facebook. Thank you. But this is getting worse, I think, is what I would take away from that. And yes, we should have all bought more Bitcoin. But let's shift into this, and because we're going to come back to your story. I want to see kind of what happened in the middle, what happened at the end, which will be kind of nice to sort of get some closure on what you went through. PTSD does not sound fun from that, but I don't blame you. Jep. So Jep, by the way, if you don't know Jep's like one of the smartest people. He also, and don't tell me I'm wrong here, I think he looks just like Stephen Colbert. He hates that I say that, but you really do. I saw
Very
Stephen
flattering.
Colbert. Yeah, sure. I mean, he's on TV all the time. But I went and saw Stephen Colbert. I knew him from the Dana Carvey show back in the day. But he was great in person. But you look like Stephen Colbert.
I may look like him, but I don't have his talent. I wish I did.
I don't know. You're close, my friend. So we talked a little bit in the pre-interview. You're actually the one that said that there's no bigger threat to our practice. You said liabilities, but I think I could stretch it just to like our practice and what we should be focused on than cybersecurity. And that statement kind of hit me, but I thought through it and I was like, well, what is a bigger threat? You know, we talk all the time about direct-to-consumer aligner systems, about, corporate orthodontics, depending on your view on that, about residency programs and changes happening there, or whatever the thing may be. Even like people worried about getting sued over a case, like medical liabilities. But cybersecurity, in your opinion, is a bigger threat, right?
Well, to me, it's a more real threat that you do have control over it, but if and when it happens, It's a big deal. And, most of us think about liabilities in terms of malpractice and things like that, because, that's the environment we're raised in. Don't do X because you're liable, that kind of stuff. Understand your limitations, understand what you can and can't do. And that's how we're raised within the dental and professional community. The average dental lawsuit of all dentists currently is $68,000. When you factor in what cybersecurity can cost you just in terms of getting your data back in Bitcoin, and Gary knows more about this data than I do that's current, but, current Bitcoin, 2, 3, 4, 5 Bitcoin, that's a chunk. But that's only the beginning. Lauren already outlined loss of data. You may or may not get your data back. How much is that going to cost you? Then factor in the bureaucracy of HIPAA that gets involved very quickly. And let's say you have a practice, average number of new patients per year that you're collecting data on, not starts, new patients, right? So everyone has a social security number, everyone has a name, everyone has records that you probably took on them, the whole 9 yards. Those are getting input into your system. Let's say you're a practice of 450 new patient exams a year, pretty routine practice. Multiply that by 10 years. Now you're at 4,500 records. Your practice is actually larger than most small hospitals at this point in the number of the records that they have. Then you factor in that if you not even willful negligence under the current HIPAA rules, your minimum fine is $100 per offense. Multiply those numbers out, and the quick and dirty math on that is just under $500,000. Okay, that's just on the bureaucratic side. Not to mention the Bitcoin side, loss of records to your practice, loss of time on the audit, and all the legal stuff. And then further boot, you've got all the potential embarrassment. And Lauren, bless your heart for having to go through that. You just referenced PTSD. I totally am empathetic towards that. But, then you have to get on the phone and call to your patients because you are legally obligated to inform every patient that you had a records violation on. And I think Gary can support this, So to me, it is, there is no bigger threat. Honestly, right now, and knock on some wood around here, my desk is wood, I'd rather get sued. I really would, than to have a cyber attack. I hope that never I hope neither of those ever happened to me. But I honestly, if somebody came in here right now, make a choice, I'm like, bring on the lawsuit.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a paradigm shift for most people. And I think for our community, it's maybe some people get that, or people that have known someone who's had that happen. It became a little more real for me, and I'm going to share some of this later, but there was a group of Memphis dentists that this happened to just about 4 or 5 months ago. And it was terrible. They called me in a panic because I was the, I guess of the people in the Memphis Dental Society, I was like the one that they assumed would know. And I was like, I don't have a clue. I was like, I know this Black Talon group, like give them a call, what do you do? So I asked this in a group in the Digital Orthodontist Facebook group, what would you do if you had a cyber attack? And there was, everything from I'd retire to I'd cry and, get under my covers to, some people that, it won't be that bad because I'm protected, which we'll get into maybe later. And so I think there's,
it's funny you say that because, and I'm a client of Black Talon, just for any potential conflicts of interest here. But one of my initial interviews with Black Talon, they belayed a story to me. This is like 2 years ago of an ENT group that got hit. They had 3 practice locations. They shut down for the day, interviewed with their attorneys, and 48 hours later, they declared bankruptcy and closed shop. Eesh. And that was it. And that's what woke me up. If a 3 practice corporation did that within 48, 72 hours of being hit, that's a big deal.
Yeah, for sure. We've got a couple questions coming in, and I want to answer these as they come in. So first one I saw was from Matt. Man, we have some interesting last names tonight. God bless you, Matt. Juicy, Josie. I have no idea. Juice. I don't know. The juice is loose. I have no idea. He's asking about cloud-based practice management software. Cloud9, OrthoFi, things like that. This actually came up in the group. Gary, I'm going to let you answer this. Is it totally secure if your data lives in the cloud?
Right. So we're asked this question all the time. I think it's a fabulous question with so many practices in the cloud. So the first thing I will always say, and Dr. Kyle, we talked about this earlier, nothing's 100%. If you're going to bet the farm on some piece of technology to protect you, it's ultimately going to fail. That's the reality of the world we live in right now. Is cloud technology inherently more secure? Yeah, typically, because you're typically having a larger company that might have security people in place trying to secure this. But they're also a bigger target. Okay, you think the hackers don't figure this stuff out? You think they don't know who the big players are in orthodontics and dental and oral surgery? 100%. One of the largest dental cloud technology companies got hit 3 times by cyber attacks in Q4. Okay, you're talking tens, probably even more, tens of millions of patient records in those systems. Okay, so if you don't think there's big dollars attached to a ransomware attack there, you're crazy, right? They're probably talk about Bitcoin. What do you think? 100 Bitcoin for something like that, taking out, tens of millions of patient records? Absolutely. So I think people who offset their risk going to cloud have to understand that there is still a risk. And what I hear all the time is, well, I don't care if I get hit with ransomware because, all my data is in the cloud. Well, there is always the possibility that ransomware can move from one network up into the cloud. It's happened. A very, very large healthcare EMR system about a year and a half ago, that actually happened. It started in physician's office and moved into cloud servers. The other thing that we're starting to see a lot of is the theft of usernames and passwords. So you get malicious code on your computer that steals your username and password. So Dave or Mary sitting at the front desk is punching in their cloud password to log into their ortho software, and it gets stolen. The hacker over in Russia logs in as the person sitting at your front desk. So I think, that's something that we all have to think about. And I think it's really important that you have to understand that it's equally important to protect your network, whether you are on the cloud or not. Dr. Kyle, you mentioned, I'm a believer in cloud overall. I don't think it's the end all to be all. I built one of the very first healthcare cloud systems back in the late 90s. And I think there's a lot of advantages to it. But I saw it on your Facebook group the last night. Like we said, a lot of orthodontists are offsetting risk and say, hey, if there's a ransomware attack, it's on them, right? If their system gets hit, it's on them. But if you understand the HIPAA laws in most state laws now, it's still your patient data.
Data.
Yeah, it's still your patient data. If you're paying another company to host your data in the cloud and they get hit, it's still your breach. Okay.
So real quick question along these lines, and give me like a 2-sentence answer here.
Sure.
What can you do to protect yourself if you're on cloud? Like, what's like the very quick answer, which I guess we'll get to later, but.
Yeah, the quick, well, there probably is no quick answer, but you have to protect your local network, right? You have to make sure your computers are secure. And as I alluded to, a lot of doctors say, oh, my security is in the cloud. It doesn't work that way. And then third-party risk, understand who's hosting your data, what security measures they have in place. People don't understand that. We've dealt with a whole bunch of breaches where healthcare data is up in Amazon Web Services, AWS, or Microsoft Azure, and the data gets hit. And, we're on the phone with the owners of the practice or the executives of the organization. They're like, how's this possible? Amazon's like the largest hosting company in the world. I thought they were the most secure. Well, it's only as secure as the settings that have been implemented to secure that data and the application itself. The application's not secure. Hackers can break in and get your data through the application. Yeah. So it's all this stuff is a multi-layered approach.
Yeah. So this is starting to feel like a podcast where there's not going to be much good news. This is you need to go watch something that's feel good after this, right? So let's do this. First off, I just want to say thank you guys. I have a little advertisement. 3M Oral Care, great company that I work with, full disclosure. But they've sponsored the podcast this season. And so we've got a short video ad from them. I don't think I prepped you guys for this. So we're going to play an ad and we're going to be up in the corner, sort of like Mystery Science Theater as this ad plays. So Scott, roll that beautiful bean footage. All right. Little teaser there from 3M. Thank you, 3M. I don't know if you saw the aligners episode that we did a couple weeks ago. We had 3M, we had ULab, we had Invisalign. It's pretty cool stuff. We got a lot of chatter from that. All right, we've got so many questions. Man, I don't know how we're going to answer all these. I guess what I would just say, like, it's probably self-evident, but reach out to Gary if you have other questions. He's the one that can answer these things for you. The rest of the three of us, we're just candy here. We're just here to look good and talk. So we're orthodontist. So let's jump into this. We're going to talk about during a cyber attack. That was before a cyber attack. We'll talk about during a cyber attack. Actually, here's another good before question. I have to ask this. Ryan Hurley, one of the smartest people I know, he asked if cyber liability insurance is recommended and helpful in these situations. I'm getting a head nod from Jep.
Yeah.
Gary, what do you think?
We tell every client to get cyber liability coverage. The only thing I will say is don't use it to offset risk, right? The liability policy is there if everything else fails, right? If you've implemented sound security measures and that fails, then you default to your policy. So, but yes, it's starting to creep up because of what happened in 2020 with so many practices being hit. So
the other thing is make sure you look at your policy. There's some interesting languaging in the policies. One of which, if you are not actively managing your network or have your network actively managed in some way from a security perspective, policy isn't effective. You're paying for you're just paying for a piece of paper at that point. So it's, these insurance companies again, you cannot mitigate your risk just by getting a policy. You have to get the policy for in the event you get attacked, but you also have to do your due diligence.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I happen to have a cyber theft rider on my practice insurance that I had no idea about. And after I paid the $9,800 in Bitcoin, I just decided to reach out to my insurance company, and I had a rider on there for a benefit of $10,000. So I recovered
something.
The money, the $9,800 that got me absolutely nothing. So at least that was nice. I'm sure I could never use it again or get that insurance again, but maybe I could.
Yeah, I think I have heard from people who've getting attacked. 3 years is the waiting period, the cooling off period. Yeah, that their price had gone up significantly after their attack, and so we looked at pricing today with our State Farm agent. We just texted him over because I was studying up on this, and it wasn't that outrageous. It was like $50,000 of coverage. It didn't include the negotiator, so it'd just be like extraneous costs, and it was like, I don't know, a couple $100 a year, something like that.
Yeah, it's not terribly expensive. And for those that are listening, the AAO's got a policy as well, and the people through the AAO will actually farm it to a couple of different unit covers, so and give you a couple of different quotes. So
yeah, there you go. All right, well, let's shift on into this. Great stuff. So during an attack, Gary, I guess one question I've got is, what are some trends that you're seeing in terms of cyber attacks in orthodontic practices right now? Like, what's happening these days?
Right. So I think the big thing is ransomware 2.0. So Dr. Lauren kind of said, they said the agent probably said, didn't take the data, right? That's totally shifted. The data is now pointing to 70% of victims have their data stolen. So we are working multiple cases right now. An orthodontist out in Southern Cal that had all their data stolen, and they didn't believe it, right? The hackers said that they stole all their data. We start communicating with the hackers, and our security guys said to them, literally, prove that you stole all our data. So you know what they did? They sent us a link, and we downloaded a gigabyte of the doctor's files. All right, so they literally offloaded his entire practice data, right? So this is a huge problem. 70%, the odds are not good there. The other trends we're seeing is the fact that they gain access to the system often for weeks ahead of time, undetected, right? They'll get in your system using various methodologies. They are also deploying screen sharing software. So you talk about risk for cloud. What if they can watch everything you're doing, right? This practice that we're just finishing up right now, combo pediatric ortho practice, and they installed screen sharing software on every single one of the computers in the practice, and we're able to literally watch every patient record that they opened, every x-ray, every chart, right? And that was one of the most upsetting things for the doctor besides the data being stolen. He's like, so when I was opening websites and my own personal email, they could watch it? Yes, right? So that's an issue. And when we analyzed the malicious code that they installed, it also was able to steal passwords out of the doctor's browser, like Google Chrome. And it also had a tool to crack passwords, on the computers. So those are the types of trends. And then the other thing that we're seeing is, it was interesting to hear Dr. Lauren say that all our computers got hit that far back, because the original trend, like 2016, 17, is they would typically take out maybe the server and a workstation or two. But typically what we see now is 100% strike. Literally every single computer is gone, right? Encrypted with ransomware. What you have to realize is you can't just repair these computers per se. They got to be stripped, right? You got to format the hard drives, rebuild them all, start from scratch, because these hackers leave backdoors, malicious code on them. So we're seeing in most cases 100% strike on these attacks. And then, the ransomware payments keep going up and up. And the unfortunate thing is, what they're chasing? The insurance payments, right? Because the insurance companies will be like, oh, you have a $250,000 policy. They want 100 grand. Here's 100 grand. Go pay them. You know what happens? The hackers were like, oh, they paid 100 grand. Oh, let me do the next attack. Let me see if I can get 150 out of them, right? And the insurance company's like, yep, write that check too. So I'm not saying you shouldn't get insurance, but that's the problem here, right? It's perpetuating. And when practices and businesses aren't securing it, they're contributing to the problem. And I was I think this is very eye-opening, because as you mentioned, I do a lot of calls with government agencies to help clients out. Now I was on a call with Department of Justice, and one of the head attorneys, U.S. attorneys, said this. She said that by businesses not properly securing their network and making these ransomware payments, we are tracking this money going to terrorist organizations. So average Dr. Mary Smith, right, who just paid out $40,000 in ransom, where's that money going, right? We know that it goes to, in many cases, nation states, terrorist organizations, and they do bad things with this money, right? So we have to work as a community to try and protect it. I know it's a slightly longer answer than you had expected, but that's the trend right now, right? That's what's going on, and that's the real world. And it's unfortunate to see, the damage that's being done and the amount of downtime. I will tell you for a fact, because we do these ransomware cases all the time. Sometimes we're working 4, 5, 6 cases a week. Most practices have to be down for almost 2 weeks. That's how long it takes to recover, right? The doctors are like, well, I have this $2,000 backup system sitting in my server room. How's this even possible? I was promised by my IT company I could be back up and running in 15 minutes. Like, yeah, but that's kind of like a hope and a dream, right? That's not how this is really working, or that backup drive is taken out. I think the best example that I have is we did a big, similar to the Memphis breach, right? And in like Easter Passover of 2020, about 100 dental practices in Maryland and Virginia got hit. And we were getting all these phone calls, and we start logging into these systems. And they're like, hey, I got this really expensive backup solution. I'm sure you guys can get the data off of it. Our vendor told us it was ransomware proof. We're like, okay, let's check it out. So we start logging into all these practices, and we see the exact same fingerprint. There is zero data on these backup drives. And then we realized this is consistent, right? We know for a fact that the data was there, but now it's not. So long story short, it turns out that the hackers figured out how to exploit these backup drives and wipe them clean. So it forced the hand of all the doctors. Every single doctor had to pay the ransom. There was approximately $4 million paid out on this one attack. So what happened here? The vendor that manufactures these expensive backup drives had a vulnerability. They weren't susceptible to ransomware, but they were able to bypass the username and password authentication and literally format the hard drives on the backups. So they're getting more and more sophisticated, because they know, right, if Dr. Jep or Dr. Lauren has a good backup, you're probably not going to pay. Unless they stole your data, then you're probably going to pay because you don't want it released. So the hackers are setting up these shaming websites where they will take 1 to 10% of your data and actually publish it. So you can go to a lot of these hackers' websites right now and you scroll through them and you will literally see dental practices, medical practices. You click on the name of the practice, it'll show you photographs of the patients, their health history forms, their driver's licenses, insurance cards, and they're not taking a little black bar and covering up the patient's name, right? They're showing you everything. So that's kind of what's going on right now.
Well, again, more good news for those of you.
Every time we can play a game. Every time we say ransomware or Bitcoin, you have to take a shot. How's that?
Yeah, I wish.
Wow. Yeah. So, man, a lot going on there. Jep, maybe a couple other ways, because I'm getting a lot of questions, which is a good sign, I think. And I've got one about Mac versus Windows and startup practice that I want to get to in a second. But I guess if I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, well, okay, man, I'm vulnerable on all these different areas, like some random backup drive, like, gosh, how would I even know that? Where I'm working with an IT company that's out of date and they're vulnerable. That's what the Memphis breach was a mom and pop IT company that, they got hacked through their, I think, screen sharing software or something.
Right.
What are some other ways, Jep, that we should be aware of as orthodontists and business owners?
Well, the biggest thing to be aware of, this really needs to become a state of mind. And I'm sure Lauren can probably back me up on this. You have to develop a culture within your practice of thinking about security. And honestly, it starts the most common way or one of the more common ways that this ends up happening is through an innocent keystroke on an email that is phishing out to a staff member that you just hired and may not even be aware that this stuff exists. There's horrific stories about very attractive, very real emails that come in and all of a sudden it downloads malicious code that's buried in the image that the staff member clicked on. Next thing you know, you've got some element of keyboard or keystroke recording or screen share recording or whatever. And that's the gateway. And then once that's in, that's the toehold within the front door. And they just start working away. It's already been discussed that, these people are on the network for a few weeks sometimes, just sniffing around, taking every one of your databases to task. And that's why when they pull the trigger, every computer is exposed. So the first recommendation is you got to develop a mindset. Has become just like getting medical malpractice insurance. It's one of those things you have to develop the mentality that there are very real criminals out there. And just like you have a lock on your front door, you got to buy a lock for your practice and you have to maintain that lock. So that's the biggest recommendation I can give. And the second biggest is hire a professional. I cannot emphasize this enough. Even though I'm a quote unquote technologist, I love technology. I'm addicted to new stuff. I just am. So I've always had a proclivity for this, but even I hire a Black Talon to do my cybersecurity because the guys that I talk to at Black Talon, holy cow, you can study all day and you can't be an orthodontist and know what these people know. You just can't. And even if you know, you can't be up to date. You cannot stay up to date on what's necessary to protect your practice. So you need to hire a professional that is independent of your network company. Just like you have an accountant that looks at your books every year and analyzes what you're doing to make sure all the beans are in the right spot. You need a security specialist to make sure and keep everybody honest that's on your network and trained. Came in, the first thing Black Talon did was they came in and they trained our staff members on what to do and how to respond. So it's really those two things.
Yeah, that's great. When I started, I'm a tech guy too, maybe not on your level, Jep, maybe one
Oh
day.
no, I doubt that very seriously.
But I started and I had Mac computers and I was pretty confident in my own ability to make sure everything was fine. And then I think I had an IT company come in like year 2 or 3 and they're like, you don't have a firewall? I was like, no, there's like a firewall in the modem, like, and they're like, no, this is not good. And so, I'm just as guilty of sort of equating Macs to like security as one might equate, cloud computing now to security. And the problem is that people are given this false sense of confidence, I think, by vendors that are trying to sell things. And so shame on us for that, those of us who sell things wrongly. So let's go along those lines. And then, Lauren, I want to get to you and talk about kind of what actually happened with your attack. But NP, whoever that is, hey, NP, asked if Mac-based computers are less prone to attacks compared to Windows-based systems. And then he's also, or she is doing a startup. So how can someone afford that, cybersecurity? Because I know it's not inexpensive. How do they do that when they're a startup? I guess, Gary, that's a question for you.
Sure. Yeah, Macs are inherently more secure. There's no doubt about that. They're taking a little bit of a beating lately with some of the security issues that is being exposed. There was an article just a couple of days ago where 30,000 Macs were compromised by some quote unquote unknown malicious code. But yeah, Macs are typically more secure by the nature of their operating systems, but they can still expose data. They can still be potentially accessed or breached, things like that. For a startup, I think it is important. Yes, security is not cheap, right? But it's almost part of doing business now. And if you're going to invest in a practice and invest in your future, then you got to think about the ramifications. Dr. Lauren is the perfect example, of what can happen. And you were very young with your practice. It sounded like you had just purchased it, right? So it can really happen to anyone. You don't have to spend a fortune. You can spend for good cybersecurity, a couple $100 a month. So if you're going to be purchasing the practice, put a line in your budget for it, right? And I think it's really important to understand that, because the flip side is, the six-figure price tag in the event that you are a victim, and that's going to hurt pretty bad.
Yeah, I was going to say that is that you actually can't afford to not do it if you're a startup, because it could sink you. But I remember when I thought, $100 a month, oh my gosh, I'm not doing that. When you're starting out, especially I did a cold start, just the way I thought, I was a penny pincher. So, but it is important. And I think, again, this is a paradigm shift of the things that we consider, like, oh yeah, I'll have an accountant and I'll have a financial planner and I'll have, this is one of those sort of arenas that you just have to stay protected on. Lauren, let's talk about, again, this is during the cyber attack. I know we're kind of all over the place, but tell me how your practice was actually hacked. You kind of got at that, but I guess what was the immediate aftermath like? You said maybe you're closed for 2 weeks, but how did it affect your practice and how did you deal with it?
Yeah. So I was closed, I think almost 3 weeks, like Gary mentioned. And we spent that time just scrambling. I was in full panic. I let my staff go home. And it was my young IT guy. We had an FBI agent who came to my office and spent a lot of time with me, helped me negotiate with the hackers. She said a lot of the same things Gary just mentioned about how we're really just, they have a lot of conflict, the FBI does, about paying the ransom. But when they see business owners like myself in such distress, she was like, maybe it's worth a shot. It was an awful situation. And so she was the one negotiating back and forth. We literally got these broken English emails from the hackers. She asked them to prove if they had actually stolen data, and they could not give us any proof, which allowed us to then negotiate the Bitcoin payment down, which also gave me some peace of mind that maybe my actual data wasn't stolen and it was truly just locked. So I spent 2.5 weeks at my office all day, every day, trying to figure out how we could get the backup hard drives to work, and maybe we're missing something. And the ransomware affected the backup drive that was plugged into the server at the time, so it infected that. But our other 3 disks were not working. It was not working. We were not running it right nightly. However you're supposed to do it. I, as the owner, should have known and should have been doing it, but I wasn't. And so basically I spent the last half of those 2.5 weeks trying to pick up the pieces and come together with my team to build a plan. We restored everything from February backwards. So basically we were looking at, let me go backwards. At the time I had Ortho 2 Viewpoint. I was not cloud-based. The cyber attack happened to me 25 days before I was scheduled to move over to Ortho 2 Edge. So it
you would have had your backups.
I would have had my backups.
Mm.
I would have had a lot more to lean on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I had to come up with a plan, and that plan included reaching out to the patient base. I was very vague with what I did say. Maybe that was my naivete, but I decided to tell people a very small piece of what happened, also to save face. And it's a big reason I haven't shared this story ever. I've told it one time on Facebook to a small group of orthodontists, but I haven't told my friends this story. You know, it's an embarrassing story. It sucks. So
but it could happen to anybody.
It can. I still kick myself. It's like, how was I not checking the backups? I don't know. So I picked up the pieces and we went paper for a while. And literally, if you're an orthodontist listening to this, you can really appreciate this. My patient schedule is about 75 people a day. I work 3 days a week. So come September, after I picked up the pieces of this attack, we had 75 kids through our doors, and I didn't know any of their names. I didn't know anything. I didn't know the schedule. I didn't know what they were coming in for. I didn't know anything. My team and I would have to be like, hey, Bobby, come on in. Let's take a look at you. And I would literally ask the parents, you know what? I'm going to need you to fill out this information one more time. Don't worry. You know, we're just switching softwares. I mean, the talk tracks were so stressful. And I would come clean to certain parents that I would tell what happened. And everyone was understanding. I didn't have one patient say, who are you? What are you doing? You know, I'm a mom and pop business, and people make mistakes. So it was so stressful. And that went on for a long time. I took fresh records on every single person that came through my door for a solid 5 months.
I mean, I've had my internet go down for a day, and it's like the end of the world. It's like, I mean, I may as well be like stranded on a desert island, like, trying to rub two sticks together to start a fire. Like it's the worst thing.
There was a few weeks there where I literally just told because my husband works full time. I was like, I'm throwing in the towel. I'm just going to sell the business. I'm going to find a new career. I mean, how dramatic is that, right? But at the time, that's how stressed out I was. I was getting ulcers. It was awful because, you spend all these years becoming a professional and you have this business. And, I finally had my own practice after associating for 5 years, and I was so proud of myself. And then here we are, and I look like an idiot every day. It was terrible.
That's rough.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to need a shower after this thing. I'm just a hot mess over here. So I apologize to 3M. I'm putting the ads like right in these like desperate moments. And now an advertisement.
Now more from 3M.
Actually, it's kind of good. It's like in a podcast, one of those like true crime podcasts. It's like,
totally.
A moment from our sponsor. And then it's like some sort of irritable bowel, medication or something. So, all right. Before we get to our final segment of the night, I do have one final word from our very generous and excellent sponsor, 3M Oral Care. So a new 3M brand Clarity Aligner solution is coming. Big announcement. It's offering proprietary technology and advanced treatment design from a leader in orthodontics that you trust. You won't want to miss the unique benefits it offers your practice. Sign up to be the first to find out at 3m.com/moreclarity. That's 3m.com/MORE. Clarity, and clarity is spelled CLARITY. 3m.com/moreclarity. Thank you, 3M, for that. And let's head into our last segment. We're a little over on time, but we've had some good questions. I think this is good info. So we'll try and speed through the last bit of this somewhat. But let's give it 15 minutes or so, and I think that'll be good. So we've talked about what happened before a cyber attack and during a cyber attack. Now let's talk about after a cyber attack. And I think the real takeaway, what I want for people who are tuning into this, is that they feel equipped to try and avoid these things. Because I hate stress. I like peace. We all like those things. Peace being the thing that we like. Most of us like bacon, but we all like peace. And we want to avoid this kind of crap. Like, I don't want this for anybody. Like, I can tell in Lauren's, the way she describes this is like, it's a tragic event. And I mean, nobody wants to deal with that. So we've talked about, Gary, the average downtime, right? About 2 weeks. Okay. I've heard, a month. I'm sure there's longer. I saw someone say that the IT company in Maryland, I think that was being discussed, they folded, they left their customers hanging. I mean, this can destroy businesses. You made a good point, I think, about the money side of this. Is so many people today are caught up in how to save money and earn more money, where to invest, all these sorts of like money making things, but they're maybe like not considering the liabilities that could lead to loss of funds. We like to think in the positive side, but maybe not in the negative side. Because again, this stuff, like I said, I want to take a shower. Like, it's not fun to think about and talk about, but it's a real, risk and a real threat. So what are the average costs that you're seeing when you're a victim of a cyber attack?
So, and these are our numbers based off of the dental practices that we've worked with. If you're a small little practice, single provider, 10 computers, your bill is going to be around $100,000. All right. If you're multi-doctor, you've been in practice for years, you have a larger network, you have cone beam, you have STL files from intraoral scanners, your bill could be double, triple. The issue here is the hackers value the amount of data and the number of computers they hit. It's proportional. It literally is. That's why, like in these larger attacks like Memphis, some of your colleagues paid 15, 20 grand and others paid six figures. It's because they were larger practices. So when you add up the Bitcoin payment, the mitigation fees from a company like ours, the lost revenue, the legal fees, and, the replacement of hardware, it adds up really quick. Then, we won't even have time to talk about, the bad case scenario where you have to start notifying your patients. You're talking, for an average ortho practice, potentially, like Dr. Paschal said, hundreds of thousands of dollars, so it all adds up very quickly.
So tell me if this is true. I was talking with someone that had this happen. The office he knew of had paid $250,000. He had paid $40,000 because he didn't need his data. As an endodontist, it wasn't maybe as essential. Now, orthodontics, we have to have our data. Like, ours is like really essential to what we do. He was saying maybe an oral surgeon, it's a lot of that's just kind of, you see them once and they come back and they've sent letters. Like, there's a way to recover that. Orthodontists need it. He said it was $3,000 to $5,000 just for the forensic expense, which is to kind of like figure out if your data was actually stolen, if there's HIPAA considerations or not. He even mentioned that there's 4 tiers of breaches according to the U.S. government, and that there's the top tier could be over $1 million in fines. Jep was talking about some fines that could kind of accrue based on HIPAA violations. But this, in his opinion, you'll correct me if I'm wrong here, Gary, was that it required a combination of gross negligence and then trying to hide it on the back end. So I guess I would say in some of this, it's like when this happens, which here's a good question. If this happens, like what should you do first of all?
Great question. So the very first thing you should do is, if you think your network's been hit, pull the internet connection. Literally shut the modem off, the cable modem, the router, pull the power cord out so you are 100% disconnected from the network. Second thing is, don't turn off any computers. Third thing is, immediately if you have a backup drive connected, unplug the backup drive, right? You got to disconnect that. There's a chance that the hackers hadn't hit it yet. Most likely they did, but that could be your only saving grace. And then the next thing you should do is basically call a timeout, right? Because what do most people want to do when there's a fire? Run into the fire and save everyone. But, that's fine for that type of scenario. But for a cyber event, you can do a lot of damage, right? And erase a lot of this forensics evidence that may save you by starting to try and erase things or reverse engineer things or run antivirus software to get rid of it. Call a cyber firm, right? Cyber firms understand the methodologies that the hackers use, the type of attacks that they execute, but more importantly, they understand usually the state and the federal regulations, and you have to be thinking about that from the second the attack occurs. Because most doctors, you know what they say? When am I going to be back up? I'm like, that's the last thing you should be thinking about right now. I get it. You need to treat your patients. You need to generate revenue. But if you go about this wrong, right, and you rush into the fire here, you'll be back up and running maybe a couple days earlier, but 3 months from now, you're going to pay the price, right? From a compliance standpoint, regulatory and things like that. So, it has to be a well thought out, well executed plan. But those are the things that we recommend, to do initially. Some of the other things you can do is start gathering together installation disks for all your software, because you're going to go through a recovery period. The other suggestion that I have for everyone is everyone should have their usernames and passwords to every device on your network. Okay. The password to your server, to your firewall, to your backups, because you know what happens when the IT vendor gets hit. You saw one of your colleagues post it, they punch out. I can't handle this. I have 1,000 computers in my, within my client's environments that are all encrypted with ransomware. I can't service that. I have 3 people doing it. It's impossible. I see it all the time. And then what happens is the practice calls a cyber firm and we're like, hey, we need your passwords. I don't have that. Can you get them? Now the IT guy won't call me back. Now what? Right? Because they're underwater. They're taking hundreds of phone calls, everyone yelling and screaming, get to my office right now, because they're, everyone's important, and they are. I mean, it's your patient records, it's your livelihood. So those are the things that I would suggest to do, immediately.
Yeah,
so.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Lauren, so tell us, after kind of going through this and kind of, making it through and going through a few awkward months, and then, you've got a obviously super likable personality. So, people are going to kind of give you the benefit of the doubt, and I'm sure that they didn't think too much different about it. We've even all gotten emails, like Target sent me an email saying that my, personal information had been stolen. This is sort of becoming a common thing that you get these emails and you're like, okay, Lord knows how many times my password has been stolen out there. But what changes did you make to avoid this in the future? What did you do to your IT systems and so on and so forth?
Yeah. So I think I still have a lot to learn, and I've learned a lot from listening to Gary and Jep today. So that's great. I'm like literally taking notes over here. But immediately after, I hired a pretty well-known dental IT company to reset me up. We had to literally throw away every single computer. I literally was wiped clean, no computers left. So they started me from scratch. I immediately transitioned about 25 days later over to cloud, to Ortho2 Edge. They got me all set up there, but I still have an ongoing business relationship with an IT company who, makes sure there's multi-step security within my practice, their backup, hard drive backups. You know what? I let them do it. I honestly, I'm like, I'm paying you. Can you just help me do this? I make sure that I have a list of all of our passwords and usernames. Like Gary just said, I have it laminated in a safe space in my practice in case anything happens and I need all of that. I have ensured that I have cyber insurance. I got a different policy for in case it happens again. Let's hope it doesn't, but you never know. I might get struck by lightning 2 times. And quite honestly, I just have a different appreciation for cybersecurity. I never even knew what a ransomware was. I kid you not. I had no idea. I was like, that's cartoon stuff. So I just have a different appreciation for all of that. I have cryptic passwords on everything. And I also don't allow my staff to save anything anywhere. I do not allow them to save a Word document that details our next monthly contest on a computer. Our computers look empty, like they just came out of the box. Literally, if you went to my office right now and got my computer, it just has like a little background and then a link to Ortho2 Edge, and that's it, and Chrome. So when we need to save like a Microsoft Word document for our contests, it all gets saved into a Dropbox, which I'm sure I could probably even do something safer. But that way it's accessible via Dropbox, the cloud. It doesn't have patient information, but just, random Word documents for my practice. That way, let's say I get hacked again and I need, random Word documents that I'm using. It's all on Dropbox and it's accessible that way. And my staff has been very well trained on all of that. They are never even allowed to log into email for themselves or use my computers even on their lunch hours. It's kind of gnarly and kind of mean, but I don't even allow them to use the computers. So
wow,
you have to do that.
Good stuff, Lauren.
Yeah.
That's a great answer, because it shows the change in mindset after
Yeah.
this event. I mean,
Yep.
it shows kind of how seismic that event was for you. So,
And just to close the loop,
sure.
my practice recovered great. We thrived in 2018 and still are thriving. And I walked away with, an experience in my back pocket that I think is a valuable one to share with others in my profession and in the medical field, anybody that has a small business, quite honestly, because it's devastating. So, but I'm still learning, and I've learned a lot tonight, and I'm sure I could do better.
Well, again, thanks for being kind of vulnerable on that and willing to share it. And it means a lot to me, but it also, I think, means a lot to everyone who's watching this. So thank you. I'm just, a couple other ideas that come up is that part of this too is being able to sort of reopen or recover everything. I'm just thinking about, documents, all kinds of stuff. When you start fresh, you think about all the years and years and hours of effort that's gone into things. So to be able to do that's awesome. So let's actually I think this is a great segue into our last question, which will be for Jep, but also we'll open it up to Gary and Lauren too. Is just kind of maybe creating like a little bit of a hit list or like a top 5 or top 10 on things that we can all do to avoid a cyber attack. Jep had offered up kind of like his top 5 or whatever, but let's just start throwing some things out there. What do you got, Jep?
The number one thing is just train your staff. Lauren just hit this really hard, and I can't emphasize how important that is. Another big one for me, because I'm kind of a tech guy, kind of program. I do all my own network management, which I know that's very rare, but make sure you have a really good router with, and a firewall, and it's managed well and kept up to date. That's the other key thing. The firmware on these routers and firewalls, they have got to be kept up to date. And don't buy some off the shelf at Amazon only type of router, and get some professional help with that. And then the other thing I've got is, it's a little thing I learned years ago. It has been supported internally by other security specialists, and that's, I keep all admin accounts separate on my computer. And this is sort of in the vein of what Lauren was just referencing about not allowing staff to do any personal things on the computer. But there is software that can get around some of these, but it's a lot more difficult. So if you keep admin accounts on your computers that are not accessed during the day, and then all of the staff's computers, they do not have admin privileges. It sounds like, everybody should be doing that. It's like, oh, every computer, you wouldn't believe the number of computers that are set up that are just turned on. The resident account is an admin account, and it's never altered. And if you hack into that, you have admin privileges right to that computer. And once that happens, that is another front door into your practice. So get into that. Those are just little habits that you can get into, that you can tweak your network and tweak your computers and help yourself out a lot.
Right on. Gary, you got anything? What are some kind of hit list items that come to mind?
Yeah, I'll reiterate what both doctors said. Got to train your staff. It's not like, hey, let's have pizza and tell the staff, don't click on attachments, don't click on links. Seek professional training. It is a game changer. Dr. Paschal is 100% right. We do see quite a few attacks that are initiated because someone clicks on a link. It looks like it's coming from the oral surgeon down the street. It looks like it's a referral, but they click on something and it executes the attack. And once it starts, you can't typically stop it. I think that's really important. The other big thing that we didn't get to talk about too much is vulnerability management, right? Every device on your network, whether it's a computer, a laptop, a tablet, a smart television, your security cameras, your voice over IP, they're vulnerable. And hackers use these vulnerabilities to exploit your network. So if you're not getting a monthly vulnerability report from your IT company every month, if you're not monitoring your computers in real time for vulnerabilities, this is why cyber firms exist, in order to close those, unlocked doors and windows on your network. So you're not just inviting someone in. 60% of the firewalls we test are not configured properly, even by some of the best IT companies. Or an IT company makes a mistake and they leave the firewall open, to the outside world. So I think that's really important as well. And then I know Dr. Paschal went through this, but conducting a risk assessment, it's kind of like a cybersecurity assessment, where you're going to understand where you're vulnerable. How many people have remote employees nowadays, a billing person, a practice manager? Are they logging in from their home? what's the network like at their house? Is their little kid going to download a game accidentally that's malicious, and then it moves from the child's computer to the employee's computer, then right into your office, right? So this is something called attack surface, which we don't have time to talk about. But you have to understand the entire scope of your operation and understand where you're vulnerable and close those doors. So, these are some of the things you can do. And then I would say the last thing is what's called a penetration test, where ethical hackers at a cyber firm try and break into your office electronically, and then sit down with your IT folks and be like, hey, here's how we broke in. Here's how you can harden your network and prevent, this from happening. Very, very effective. If you talk to most law enforcement that specialize in this, they'll say, if you're not pen testing your network, you're going to get hit, because the hackers will pen test your network for you and win. Right. So those are some of the important things. And then the other thing is to understand that this has to be a multi-layered approach. Right. And I think Dr. Lauren talked about that as well. If you're going to go buy a piece of software and throw it on your computer and be like, I have cybersecurity, that's a mistake. Right. Because a lot of these technologies, this off-the-shelf software is defeated. When we do these forensic investigations, we'll see that they actually got into your network, and the very first thing they do is they shut all the computer defenses off. They shut the antivirus off, intrusion detection, things like that. And then now that they have free reign. So the whole concept that everyone has to kind of focus on is, how do we prevent someone from getting in to begin with? And then if they do get in, what type of applications can we use to potentially fight back? And there are some very, very impressive technologies that are just coming on the market that are affordable for practices that use machine learning and artificial intelligence to say, hey, I think I'm under attack. I need to fight back. And it literally reacts in a second. And sometimes it's effective and sometimes it's not. But this is part of a multi-layered approach now, right? So as things evolve, you have to evolve as practitioners. So
hey, Kyle, I got a story to share real quick.
Come on.
So I'm on vacation, and one of the security specialists that works with Gary gives me a shout and gives me a text on my phone, and I'm overseas at this point. And he says, can you get on your router or on your firewall? And I'm like, yeah, what's going on? He said, one of our ethical hackers just gained admin privileges to your server. And it was my main practice management server. And he said, I need to get on that firewall right now and do X, Y, and Z. And so this is just a great example of, here you are away from your office. And it didn't have to be an ethical hacker. The door was open. And by the way, the door was intentionally open because of the requirements of my practice management system. So it wasn't like I was falling asleep at the wheel. I was using a protocol that was defined by my practice management system. And he hacked in. And he could have been a bad guy just as easily as a good guy. And thank God in that case, he was a good guy. And so it shows the value of having ethical hackers trying to hit your system, because trust me, they hit it. I've got documents on my desk every month of programs that I have to update. And that's the one last thing I want to leave everybody with. The other thing I wanted to reference was keep all of your programs up to date. And I got to tell you, it is such a pain in the butt. And it's everything. It's everything from TeamViewer to Splashtop to Word to your practice management system to Chrome to Safari if you're on Macs. It's everything. And it is so difficult to do. It's hard to do on your own computer, let alone on every iPad in your office, every Windows computer in your office, everything in your office.
It's a great tip, because once you have 17 computers in your office and you're not the one using it primarily, the little window comes up on the Mac and I see the assistants kind of close it down real quickly. Or if I'm trying to rush to do notes, I close it down like kind of in anger. I'm like, when's the last time I updated that? Another one is Windows computers. If you have maybe your acquisition computer, Windows 7 and even 10 on some of these computers that are now getting aged out. There's so many parts of this conversation. It's tough to squeeze it into an hour and 15 minutes, but we did it, people. We did it.
We did.
I feel like we educated and maybe entertained just a touch. And man, I can't wait for that shower. I'm like sweating over here.
It's a good horror film.
Yeah, it was about an hour and 20 minutes, directed by Wes Craven. or maybe just by me. This was my mug tonight. And the reason I have this mug is because if people know me, I'm like an uber researcher. I'm like a 9 out of 9 fact finder. And so what I want to posit to people out there is that if you're going to watch this and for an hour and 15 minutes, you're like, yeah, that sounds terrible. I think I'm going to think about what I should do with this. Don't do something about it. Okay. So I myself have overthought about what to do about cybersecurity stuff. And so I'm going to make a decision on that very, very soon. So do something about that. Protect yourself. I don't want you to be on vacation like Jep, drinking martini, shaken, not stirred, and then you get, breached.
Call.
So we don't want you getting breached. Okay. So that's all we've got for the show. If you guys will stay on with me for about 2 or 3 more minutes, I have some plugs to make. The first plug, and I hope that all of you will be there, is the Digital Orthodontist Live Meeting 2021. It's coming up, and I'm getting stressed, getting verklempt right now thinking about it. It's April 8th and 9th. You can register now and save 50% with the promo code EARLYBIRD, and that will go away soon. $50 for doctors, $25 for staff, 8 hours of CE. You can't beat that, and 3M is providing those hours. It's live and interactive, the only virtual meeting that I'm aware of that really is like that. And we're going to have 10 of the biggest names in ortho with relevant content for everyone in your practice. So go now, tdolive.com. And there's more good news. See, we needed good news to follow all this bad news.
Right.
Not bad news, but, stressful news.
Sobering news.
Sobering news is kind of right. And who wants to be sober? Anyway, you won't have to wait long for another podcast. Usually I have these things like 2 weeks apart. The next podcast is next Thursday, March 4th at 8 p.m. Who scheduled that? I guess I did. And it's on the topic of influencers. So another new thing in our industry is influencers and the effect that social media has had. I mean, it kind of risen at the same level as cybersecurity at the same time. I'm going to be joined by Dr. Grant Collins, aka the Braces guy. He's got 3.3 million followers on TikTok and counting. Dr. Bobby Peterson. She has a YouTube channel or show called Being Bobby. She's incredible. She's in Brooklyn. Go look her up. And then Dr. Dovi Prero, who I call the original king of Instagram. And registration is live now at tdolive.com/podcast. If you're watching this on Apple Podcasts, thank you. And I would appreciate a 5-star review. And thanks for watching it there. But to those of us in this room right now, thank you for spending your Thursday night with me. I have to work tomorrow. I usually don't after these things. Who scheduled that? It was actually the snowstorm that we had. We were closed for a week, and so I'm working tomorrow. Woe is me. But thanks to our guests, Dr. Lauren Manfred, Dr. Jep Paschal, and Gary Salman from Black Talon. I'm playing. Gary, you were great. Thank you for doing this. And thank you also to tonight's sponsor, 3M. And from all of us here at the Digital Orthodontist Live, I'm Dr. Kyle Fagala, signing off. Thank you, guys. We're going to play some slides. We're going to play it out, and you guys are going to have a great night. Don't be too stressed. You're going to be able to tackle this. Nishant, start that practice. It's going to be great. All right. Good night, everybody. Have a good one.
Thanks, Kyle.
Bye-bye.